"Lauren, you need to see this. But don't panic." The words came out low and careful, the kind of tone that instantly made her heart skip, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Lauren Mitchell froze beside the examination table, her fingers still gripping the edge as if letting go would make something irreversible happen. The soft hum of the clinic lights suddenly feeling too loud in the silence that followed, and for a second she didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink, because she could hear Daisy behind her, the gentle, rhythmic panting of a dog that had just given birth. And that sound should have been comforting, familiar, normal, but something in the room had shifted in a way she couldn't explain, something that made the air feel heavier, like a storm had rolled in without warning. Daisy had gone into labor just under an hour ago, and everything up until that moment had been exactly what Lauren had expected. The nervous pacing, the soft whines, the vet staff moving calmly around the room, reassuring her that first litters were always a little unpredictable, but usually fine, and Lauren had believed them, because Daisy was healthy, strong, barely 3 years old, and this was supposed to be a simple, happy moment, the kind you take pictures of and send to family with a smile. But now Dr. Ryan Harper wasn't smiling. He wasn't even looking at her anymore. His eyes were fixed downward, locked onto the small bundle resting beside Daisy, and the longer he stared, the more uneasy Lauren felt, because vets didn't go quiet like this unless something was wrong, and even then they usually spoke quickly, clinically, giving explanations, next steps, options, anything to fill the space. This silence felt different. It felt like hesitation. "What do you mean?" Lauren finally asked, her voice thinner than she expected, almost like it didn't belong to her, and she took a step closer despite the tightness in her chest, drawn by equal parts fear and need, because whatever was happening, she needed to see it for herself. Daisy let out a soft, protective sound as Lauren approached, not aggressive, not panicked, just aware, like she understood that something important was unfolding and she wasn't sure how to respond. Her body curled slightly around the newborns, forming a gentle barrier, and that alone was enough to make Lauren pause again, because Daisy wasn't acting confused or distressed the way new mothers sometimes did. She was focused, intent, almost protective in a way that felt deeper than instinct. Dr. Harper exhaled slowly, as if choosing his next words with extreme care, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Lauren's stomach drop before she even processed what he said. "I've delivered hundreds of litters," he murmured, barely above a whisper, "and I've never seen anything like this." That was the moment everything shifted from concern to something else entirely, something colder, sharper, because this wasn't just a complication or a rare condition he could name and fix. This was something unfamiliar, something that didn't fit. Lauren swallowed hard, forcing herself to look past him, her eyes lowering to the tiny forms beside Daisy, and for a brief second her mind tried to make sense of what she was seeing, tried to match it to every image she'd ever known of newborn puppies, soft, small, fragile, predictable. But the longer she looked, the harder it became to hold on to that expectation, because something about them was off, not violently wrong, not grotesque, just different in a way that was impossible to ignore. And as the realization began to settle in, slow and creeping, Dr. Harper said the words that would change everything. "Lauren," he said quietly, his gaze finally lifting to meet hers. These didn't come from her. Lauren felt the words hit her before they fully made sense, like her mind refused to accept them all at once, and for a brief second, she actually shook her head, a small, instinctive movement, as if correcting a mistake in what she had just heard, because there was only one explanation that could exist in her world, only one version of reality that fit the past hour, and that was that Daisy had just given birth, that these were her puppies, that everything was exactly what it looked like, and anything else was impossible, but Dr. Harper was not the kind of man who said things like that lightly, and the look in his eyes was not confusion anymore, it was certainty, and that was what scared her the most. "That does not make any sense," Lauren said quietly, her voice tight, almost controlled in a way that betrayed how fast her thoughts were racing, and she stepped closer again, this time slower, more deliberate, her eyes scanning the small bodies beside Daisy as if looking long enough would force them to become familiar, would make them match what she expected. But the longer she looked, the more the differences began to stand out, subtle at first, almost easy to dismiss, but once noticed, impossible to ignore. The shape of their faces slightly off, the way their tiny limbs rested, not quite like the loose, uncoordinated movement of newborn puppies, but something more still, more composed. And then there was the silence. No soft squeaks, no restless shifting, just a quiet presence that felt unnatural in a room where new life had just arrived. Daisy shifted slightly, adjusting her body around them. And for a moment Lauren expected her to act differently, to pull away or show confusion, but instead Daisy lowered her head gently, nudging one of the small forms closer with a careful, deliberate motion, and that single action sent a wave of unease through Lauren, because it was not the behavior of a dog unsure of her litter. It was the behavior of a mother who had already accepted them completely. "She is protecting them," Lauren whispered, almost to herself, her eyes flicking up to Dr. Harper as if asking for reassurance that this still fit within something normal, something explainable. But he did not answer right away, his gaze returning to the examination table as he reached for a small flashlight. His movements calm but focused, like someone approaching a puzzle piece by piece rather than jumping to conclusions. "I need to check something," he said, his tone steady, and he knelt slightly, angling the light carefully without disturbing Daisy, who immediately tensed at the movement, her body tightening just enough to signal awareness, a low, warning sound forming in her throat, not aggressive, but unmistakably clear, and Dr. Harper paused, holding his position, respecting the boundary she was setting. "Easy, Daisy," he murmured softly, his voice dropping into a reassuring tone, the kind used with animals that were alert but not yet distressed. And after a few seconds, Daisy relaxed just enough for him to continue, her eyes never leaving his hand as the light moved closer to the nearest newborn. Lauren watched every movement, her breath shallow, her chest tight, because whatever he was looking for, whatever he was about to confirm, she knew it was going to change everything. And the room felt impossibly small in that moment, like all of reality had narrowed down to that single point of light illuminating something she was not ready to understand. "Look at this," Dr. Harper said quietly, not looking up, and Lauren leaned in despite herself, her mind already bracing for something she could not yet name. And as the light revealed more detail, more clarity, the last fragile piece of her expectation began to slip away, replaced by a growing realization that whatever Daisy had brought into this world, it was not what anyone had prepared her for. And the question forming in her mind was no longer whether something was wrong, but how something like this could have happened at all. The beam of light hovered just inches above the small body, and Lauren found herself leaning closer without realizing it, her eyes narrowing as her brain tried desperately to reconcile what she was seeing with what she thought she knew. Because at a glance they could still pass as newborns, still small enough, still fragile enough. But the details were beginning to separate them from that expectation in quiet, unsettling ways that built with every second she looked, and the more she focused. The more the differences refused to be ignored, the curve of the head slightly longer than it should be, the ears not folded the way she had seen in every litter she had ever searched online, and the skin beneath the thin layer of fur carried a tone that did not quite match Daisy's, not even close. And it was that mismatch that made something inside her tighten. "Do you see it?" Dr. Harper asked softly, not breaking his concentration, and Lauren swallowed before answering, her voice barely steady enough to form words. I do not know what I am supposed to be seeing," she admitted, because the truth was she saw everything and nothing at the same time. Pieces that looked familiar but arranged in a way that made them feel wrong, like a puzzle forced together incorrectly. Dr. Harper shifted the light slightly, illuminating another one, and this time Lauren noticed movement, subtle but deliberate, not the weak, instinctive twitch of a newborn puppy, but something slower, more controlled, as if the small creature was already aware of its surroundings in a way that did not match its size or age, and that was when her breath caught, because she had never seen anything like that before. Newborn puppies usually react to touch, to temperature, to sound, Dr. Harper explained quietly, his voice calm but layered with concern. They are uncoordinated, they rely entirely on instinct in the first few hours, but these, he paused, as if searching for the right word, these are responding differently. Lauren's heart began to pound harder. each beat louder in her ears as she reached out instinctively, her hand hovering just above the nearest one before stopping, unsure if she should touch it, unsure if she even wanted to. And Daisy immediately lifted her head, her eyes locking onto Lauren's hand with an intensity that made her pull back slightly, not out of fear, but out of respect, because there was no confusion in Daisy's expression, no hesitation, only a clear, unwavering protectiveness that felt stronger than anything Lauren had ever seen from her before. "She knows," Lauren whispered, the realization slipping out before she could stop it, because Daisy was not questioning them. She was not looking for guidance or reassurance. She was guarding them with purpose, like she understood something they did not, and that thought sent a chill through Lauren's chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Dr. Harper slowly straightened, turning off the flashlight as he took a small step back, giving Daisy space, his expression thoughtful now, less about observation, and more about piecing together something that was not immediately visible. "Lauren, has Daisy been anywhere unusual in the past few weeks?" he asked, his tone careful but direct, and Lauren blinked, caught off guard by the question as her mind rushed to replay recent days, trying to find anything that stood out, anything that could explain what was happening. But at first, everything felt normal, routine walks, familiar paths, the same quiet neighborhood, until something surfaced, something small that she had dismissed at the time, something that now felt heavier, more important than she had realized. She got out one night," Lauren said slowly, her voice tightening as the memory came into focus. "About 10 days ago, the back gate was open and I did not notice right away. She was gone for a few hours before I found her." And as she spoke, the room seemed to grow quieter again, because now there was a gap in the story, a missing piece that no one had accounted for. And Dr. Harper's eyes sharpened slightly as he processed that detail. "And when you found her?" he asked, and Lauren hesitated, the image becoming clearer in her mind. Daisy standing just inside the yard, unusually calm, unusually quiet, and at the time she had been relieved, grateful that nothing had happened. But now that memory shifted, changing shape under the weight of what she was seeing in front of her. She was not alone, Lauren said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. And that was the moment the question stopped being about what these creatures were, and became something far more unsettling, something that pointed to where they had come from. Lauren's words seemed to settle into the room like something heavy that could not be taken back, and for a moment neither of them spoke, because the implication was already beginning to take shape on its own, filling in gaps without needing to be explained out loud. And Dr. Harper's expression shifted in a subtle but unmistakable way, the kind of look that came when a theory started forming faster than he was ready to confirm it. "Not alone?" he repeated quietly, giving her the chance to clarify, but also watching her carefully, as if the smallest detail might matter more than either of them realized. Lauren nodded slowly, her eyes drifting back to Daisy, who remained curled protectively around the small bodies, her breathing steady, her focus unwavering, and that calmness now felt less reassuring and more deliberate, like she had known exactly what she was doing from the very beginning. "There was something with her," Lauren said, her voice gaining a slight edge as memory sharpened under pressure. "I could not see clearly at first. It was late. The yard light was not fully on, but I remember thinking it was strange because Daisy kept looking back at the fence like she was making sure something followed her in." Dr. Harper leaned slightly forward, his attention fully locked onto her now, every word becoming a piece of something larger. "Did you get a good look at it?" he asked, and Lauren hesitated again, frustration flickering across her face because she wished she had paid more attention, wished she had questioned it more at the time instead of brushing it off as nothing important. "I thought it was just another dog," she admitted, shaking her head slightly. "Maybe smaller, maybe injured, I do not know. It stayed low to the ground and did not come all the way into the light, and when I called Daisy, she came to me right away, but that other one," her voice trailed off as the memory replayed. "It did not follow. It just disappeared." The silence that followed was thicker this time, because now there was a timeline, an event that did not fit neatly into anything ordinary. And Dr. Harper's gaze shifted back to the newborns, his mind clearly working through possibilities, eliminating the impossible one by one until only the uncomfortable options remained. "Lauren," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, If Daisy was in contact with another animal recently, especially one that may have been injured or abandoned, there is a chance she did not give birth in the way we are assuming. Lauren frowned immediately, confusion mixing with disbelief. But I saw it, she insisted softly, her voice almost pleading for something stable to hold on to. I was here. She went into labor. I watched. Everything. There is no way these just appeared. Dr. Harper nodded once, acknowledging her point, but not backing away from his own. I am not saying you are wrong, he replied, his tone calm but firm. I am saying there may be more to what happened than we understand right now. He glanced again at Daisy, who shifted slightly, her body tightening just enough to pull the newborns closer, and that small movement carried a weight that neither of them could ignore anymore, because it was no longer just protective instinct. It felt intentional, almost like she was responding to the conversation itself, aware that something was being questioned. Lauren felt a chill move through her chest again, her thoughts racing ahead of her, trying to connect what she had seen that night with what was in front of her now. And the more she tried, the more one unsettling idea began to take shape, something that did not fully make sense yet, but refused to be dismissed. You think she brought them here, Lauren said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if saying it louder would make it too real. That night, you think she found them somewhere, and she stopped, because the rest of the sentence felt impossible to finish, and Dr. Harper did not interrupt, did not correct her. He simply held her gaze for a moment before looking back down at the small, silent forms beside Daisy. And that quiet lack of denial was enough to make Lauren's stomach tighten even more, because if he could not rule it out, then whatever was happening was far beyond anything she had prepared herself for. And the question now was no longer just what these creatures were, but where Daisy had found them, and why she had chosen to bring them home at all. The idea hung in the air, fragile and unsettling, and Lauren could feel her mind pushing against it, resisting it in small, desperate ways because accepting it meant letting go of everything she thought she understood about what had just happened. And yet the more she looked at Daisy, the harder it became to deny that something about this situation did not follow any normal pattern. Because Daisy was not confused, she was not searching, she was not reacting. As if something unexpected had occurred, she was settled, focused, and completely certain in a way that felt almost intentional. And that certainty made Lauren's chest tighten with a new kind of unease. That does not explain how they got here, Lauren said quietly, her voice steadier now, but still edged with doubt. Because even if Daisy had found them somewhere, even if she had brought them back that night, there was still the moment that Lauren had witnessed herself, the labor, the time passing, the expectation that something natural was unfolding, and that memory clashed sharply with what Dr. Harper was suggesting. I watched her, she added, her eyes flicking between him and Daisy. She went through everything, the contractions, the timing, it all looked real. Dr. Harper nodded slowly, acknowledging the conflict without dismissing it, and he moved a step closer again, this time lowering himself carefully to Daisy's level, his posture deliberately non-threatening as he observed both her and the small forms beside her with a more analytical focus. Sometimes what we expect to see shapes how we interpret what is actually happening, he said, his tone calm, not corrective, but thoughtful, as if he was working through the logic as much as explaining it. And if Daisy was already caring for something before tonight, her behavior could have overlapped with what we would normally recognize as labor, especially under stress. Lauren frowned slightly, trying to follow the reasoning, trying to fit it into something that made sense, but every explanation seemed to create more questions instead of answers, and the uncertainty was beginning to build into something heavier, something that pressed at the edges of her thoughts and refused to settle. Daisy shifted again, adjusting her body so that the small creatures were tucked closer against her side, and as she did, one of them made a faint movement, not a sound, not a cry, just a slow, deliberate stretch that seemed far too controlled for something only minutes or hours old. And Lauren's breath caught again as she noticed it, her eyes locking onto that tiny motion as if it might reveal something more if she stared long. Enough. Did you see that? She whispered, almost instinctively, and Dr. Harper nodded without hesitation, his expression tightening slightly as he reached for a small instrument from the tray beside him, something simple, non-invasive, and he paused again just outside Daisy's immediate space, waiting for her reaction before moving any closer. Daisy watched him closely, her eyes tracking every movement, and for a moment the room felt suspended, like everything depended on whether she would allow what came next. And after a few seconds that felt much longer, she lowered her head slightly, not fully relaxed, but not resisting either, a quiet signal that she was allowing him just enough access to continue. Dr. Harper moved slowly, carefully, extending the instrument toward one of the small bodies without touching it first, observing its response, and what followed made him pause in a way that Lauren could not miss, because instead of the weak, instinctive reaction of a newborn, the small creature shifted again with that same measured motion, subtle but intentional, and it turned slightly toward the movement, not blindly, not randomly, but as if it recognized the presence of something nearby. Lauren felt a chill move through her, sharper this time, because that kind of awareness did not belong in something so small, something that had supposedly just come into the world, and the gap between what she expected and what she was seeing was growing too wide to ignore. Dr. Harper slowly withdrew the instrument, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed what he had just observed, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a quiet certainty that made Lauren's stomach drop even further. "These are not newborns," he said, not as a guess, but as a conclusion, and the weight of that statement settled over the room in a way that made everything feel different, because if that was true, then whatever Daisy had brought into this space had a history that neither of them had seen, a beginning that existed somewhere outside this moment, and the question that followed was no longer just about what they were, but about how long they had already been here before anyone realized it. Lauren felt the weight of those words settle into her chest like something final, something that closed off every simple explanation she had been holding on to. And for a moment she did not respond at all, because her mind was no longer trying to prove anything wrong. It was trying to catch up, trying to rebuild the entire sequence of events from a new perspective that did not feel stable yet. And as she looked at Daisy again, really looked this time, she began to notice something she had missed. Before, not in the newborns, but in Daisy herself, in the way her body was positioned, in the way she was not exhausted in the way she should have been after labor, not trembling, not weak, but alert, composed, and entirely focused on protecting what was in front of her. "If they are not newborns," Lauren said slowly, her voice quieter now, more careful, "then how old are they?" The question lingered for only a second before Dr. Harper answered, not with a number, but with something far more unsettling. "Old enough to respond with awareness," he said, his tone measured, and he stepped back slightly, giving both Daisy and the small creature space as he processed everything they had observed, his expression no longer uncertain, but deeply focused, like someone who had just confirmed a theory he had not wanted to be right. Lauren swallowed hard, her eyes drifting back down, and this time she noticed it more clearly, one of the small bodies shifting again, its movement not random, not instinctive, but directed, as if it was orienting itself within the space. And that single detail sent a sharper chill through her than anything before, because it meant that whatever these creatures were, they had already developed beyond the stage they were supposed to be in. "This is not possible," she whispered, but the words felt weaker now, less like a denial and more like a reaction to something she could not yet accept, and Dr. Harper did not correct her. He simply continued observing, letting the reality speak for itself. "Lauren," he said after a moment, his voice steady but lower than before, "when Daisy disappeared that night, you said she was gone for a few hours." Lauren nodded, slowly, her thoughts already returning to that moment, replaying it again and again, searching for anything she had overlooked. "Yes," she answered, "maybe 3 hours, not more than that." Dr. Harper inhaled quietly, then exhaled as if preparing to say something he knew would not be easy to hear. 3 hours is enough time for a dog to travel several miles, especially if she is following a scent or a sound, he explained, and as he spoke, Lauren could feel the pieces shifting again, rearranging into something that felt increasingly real. "You think she found them somewhere out there," Lauren said, her voice tightening, and this time it was not a question, it was a realization forming in real time. Dr. Harper nodded once, not hesitating. "I think she found them, and I think she made a decision," he said, his eyes briefly meeting hers before returning to Daisy, who at that exact moment lowered her head again, gently nudging one of the small creatures closer to her body, a motion so deliberate, so careful, that it carried more meaning than any explanation could. Lauren felt her chest tighten again. But this time it was not just fear or confusion. It was something deeper, something more complicated. Because if Daisy had chosen to bring these creatures home, if she had chosen to care for them, then this was not an accident. It was not a mistake. It was something intentional, something driven by a response Lauren could not fully understand. But what are they? Lauren asked, her voice barely above a whisper. And for the first time since this began, Dr. Harper did not answer immediately, not because he did not want to, but because whatever answer he was considering was not simple, and as the silence stretched, the room felt heavier than ever, because the truth was no longer hiding behind confusion. It was waiting just beneath the surface, ready to be revealed. And both of them knew that once it was spoken out loud, nothing about this moment would ever feel normal again. The question lingered in the air, heavier than anything that had come before it, and Lauren could feel her heartbeat in her throat as she waited, her eyes locked on Dr. Harper as if his answer would anchor everything back into something she could understand. But the hesitation in his expression told her that whatever he was about to say was not going to bring comfort. It was only going to make things clearer in a way that might be harder to accept. Dr. Harper exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping back to the small creatures as he crouched slightly again, this time observing them not just as a veterinarian, but as someone trying to identify something that did not fit within the usual boundaries of his experience. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, more measured, as if he was choosing each word carefully to avoid saying too much too quickly. "They are not canine," he said, the statement simple but absolute, and Lauren felt something inside her tighten immediately, because even though she had already begun to suspect that, hearing it spoken out loud made it real in a way that could not be undone. "Then what are they?" she asked again, her voice sharper now, more urgent, because uncertainty was becoming harder to tolerate than the truth itself. Dr. Harper shifted slightly, adjusting his angle as he studied one of the creatures more closely, his eyes narrowing as if certain details were finally aligning in his mind. And after a brief pause, he continued, "They resemble wild species more than domestic ones. But even then, there are differences I cannot ignore." Lauren's breath caught as she processed that, her thoughts immediately jumping to the image from that night, the shadow near the fence, the shape she had dismissed as another dog. And now that memory felt completely different, heavier, more significant. "You mean something like a fox?" she asked cautiously, the word feeling strange in her mouth. But Dr. Harper did not answer right away, which only made her anxiety rise further. "Not exactly," he said finally, shaking his head slightly. "Their structure suggests something closer to a hybrid or a closely related wild animal, but the behavioral signs we are seeing do not fully match that either." Lauren felt a wave of confusion wash over her, because the explanation seemed to move further away the more he tried to define it, and she found herself looking back at Daisy again, searching for something familiar, something grounding, but Daisy remained exactly the same, calm, protective, and entirely certain, as if none of this uncertainty applied to her at all. One of the small creatures shifted again, its movement more noticeable this time, and for a brief second, its head lifted just enough to reveal its face more clearly, and Lauren froze, her breath catching as she saw the shape of its features, the subtle differences that now stood out more sharply than before, and something about it felt both unfamiliar and strangely intentional, like it belonged to a different pattern altogether. "They are aware," Dr. Harper said quietly, almost to himself, and Lauren turned back to him immediately. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tightening again. He hesitated for a moment, then looked at her directly. "I mean, they are not behaving like something that has just come into the world," he explained. "They are responding, adjusting, observing, and that level of awareness should not be present at this stage." Lauren felt her chest tighten again, the realization building in a way that felt almost overwhelming. Because if these creatures were not newborns, if they were not even the same species she had believed them to be, then Daisy's role in all of this became even more significant, even more intentional. "So she chose them," Lauren whispered, the words coming out slowly as they formed, and Dr. Harper did not correct her this time. He simply gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, because that was the only explanation that still fit everything they had seen so far. Lauren looked back at Daisy once more, and for the first time, she did not feel confusion or fear when she saw her. She felt something else entirely, something deeper, because Daisy was not reacting to a situation she did not understand. She was acting with purpose, with certainty, like she had made a decision that no one else in the room could fully comprehend. And as that realization settled in, the question that remained was no longer just about what these creatures were, but about why Daisy had chosen them specifically and what she had seen in them that no one else could yet understand. Lauren did not look away this time, not when Daisy shifted again, not when one of the small creatures pressed closer into her fur, and not when another slowly lifted its head just enough to reveal more of its features, because something inside her had changed, something that no longer resisted what she was seeing but instead tried to understand it, to find meaning in the pattern that was forming right in front of her, and the fear that had filled her chest earlier was beginning to soften into something else, something quieter, something closer to realization. "She is not confused," Lauren said slowly, her voice steady but filled with a new kind of clarity, and Dr. Harper glanced at her briefly, as if recognizing the shift in her perspective. "No," he replied, just as calm, "she is not." Daisy lowered her head again, gently pressing her nose against one of the small creatures. And this time Lauren noticed something she had not seen before, the way the creature responded, not with random movement, but with a subtle adjustment toward Daisy, as if it recognized her presence, as if it trusted her already, and that small interaction carried more weight than anything Dr. Harper had said so far, because it was not just behavior, it was connection. Lauren felt her throat tighten slightly as she watched it, her mind replaying the image of Daisy at the fence that night, the shadow that had stayed just out of view, the quiet moment she had dismissed without a second thought, and now that memory felt like the beginning of something she had completely misunderstood. "They needed her," Lauren whispered, the words forming naturally now, not as a guess, but as something that felt true in a way she could not fully explain, and Dr. Harper did not interrupt her this time, because he was watching the same thing, seeing the same pattern unfold. "Or she needed them," he added quietly, and Lauren turned her head slightly at that, the idea settling into place with surprising ease, because Daisy's behavior was not just protective, it was purposeful, like she had made a decision based on something deeper than instinct alone. Another small movement drew Lauren's attention, one of the creatures stretching again, its motion slow and controlled, and for a brief second, its eyes opened just enough to catch the light, and Lauren froze, not because of fear, but because of what she saw there, not confusion, not weakness, but awareness, calm and steady in a way that felt far beyond what it should have been. "They recognize her," Lauren said, her voice barely above a whisper, and Dr. Harper nodded once, his expression serious but no longer uncertain. "Yes," he said, "and that changes everything." The room felt different now, not because the mystery was gone, but because its meaning had shifted, and Lauren could feel it in the way her chest loosened slightly, in the way her thoughts stopped racing and began to settle into something more grounded, because this was no longer just about something strange or unexplained. It was about a choice that Daisy had made, a connection she had formed, and a responsibility she had taken on without hesitation. Daisy adjusted her body once more, pulling the small creatures closer, her movements gentle but firm, and for the first time since this began, Lauren did not feel the urge to question it, to interrupt it, or to fix it. She simply watched, because there was something undeniably real in that moment, something that did not need to be explained to be understood. "What happens now?" Lauren asked quietly, her voice no longer filled with panic, but with a cautious sense of acceptance, and Dr. Harper took a slow breath before answering, his eyes still on Daisy. "Now," he said, "we make sure they are safe, all of them." And as he spoke, Lauren realized that whatever these creatures were, whatever had brought them here, they were no longer just a mystery. They were part of something that had already begun, something Daisy had chosen, and whether it made sense or not, that choice carried a kind of certainty that neither of them could ignore anymore. The room had grown quieter in a different way now, not the heavy silence of uncertainty, but the kind that followed understanding, even if that understanding was incomplete, and Lauren found herself standing a little straighter, her eyes still fixed on Daisy, but no longer searching for answers in panic. Instead, observing with a kind of quiet respect she had not felt before, because what she was witnessing was no longer just strange. It was meaningful in a way that did not need perfect explanation to be real. Daisy shifted once more, adjusting her body with careful precision, making space for the small creatures to settle more comfortably against her. And as she did, one of them pressed closer, its movement gentle, almost instinctive, yet still carrying that same awareness Lauren had noticed earlier. And this time, instead of feeling unsettled by it, she felt something else entirely, something warmer, something that replaced the tension that had filled her chest since the moment Dr. Harper had spoken those first words. She chose them, Lauren said softly, not as a question anymore, but as a simple truth, and Dr. Harper gave a small nod, his expression calm, grounded in the same realization. Yes, he replied, and now she is responsible for them, in the only way she knows how. Lauren exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like hours, and she stepped just a little closer, careful not to disturb Daisy, her movements measured, respectful, because she understood now that this moment did not belong to her. It belonged to Daisy and the small lives she was protecting, and all she could do was support it, not control it. One of the creatures shifted again, its small form adjusting as it settled more securely against Daisy's side, and for a brief moment, its eyes opened slightly, catching the light once more, and Lauren noticed something she had not fully understood before, not just awareness, but calmness, a quiet acceptance that mirrored Daisy's own, and that connection, that shared stillness, made something inside her ease in a way she could not have expected. They trust her, Lauren said quietly, and Dr. Harper nodded again, his gaze steady as he observed the same interaction. And she trusts them, he added, and the simplicity of that exchange seemed to settle everything that had felt chaotic before, because trust did not need explanation, it did not rely on species or logic or expectation, it simply existed when it was real. Lauren felt her throat tighten slightly, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, something closer to emotion, because what she had been trying to understand as a problem, as a mystery to solve, was now revealing itself as something entirely different, something that did not need to be solved at all, only accepted. Daisy lowered her head once more, resting it gently near the small creatures, her breathing slow and steady, her presence constant, and in that quiet moment, everything felt balanced in a way that words could not fully capture, because despite everything that did not make sense, despite all the unanswered questions that still lingered, there was something undeniably right about what was happening in front of them. Lauren glanced briefly